Darryl Brooks, welcome.
Welcome.
So good to see you again. Would you agree with me that, generally speaking, boys like to be part of a tribe?
Yes.
Yeah. And, high school sports team is maybe an example, most of the time of what a healthy tribe can look like. But taken to the streets is maybe not so much. And that was kind of where you started as a young man, was on the streets. Would you talk to us about that experience and where you grew up and just a little bit about your youth, if you will?
Yeah, I'll share that with you for just a few minutes. When you talk about a tribe, it's that home environment first, right? Absentee father, nowhere in the house. And so always looked for acceptance. And so I struggled with acceptance, abandonment, rejection. And so I took to the streets because I felt that the streets was an area where they would accept me right there in the streets. And so I went to the streets and being in the streets for quite some time, doing drugs and all kind of things in the streets. And so as a result of me being in the streets, at one time it was, smoking weed, and then next thing you know, I had a best friend named Tony, a great friend of mine. We both was in high school together, and so we used to do all kind of things together. And so Tony had something that I never experienced before, and he had something called crack cocaine. Something to say, well, I got something that we can do. And so I remember him having a car, and I didn't have a car at the time. I was about 18, he was about 19. And James, I tell you, we was at this old car wash, in the small town I live in, Crosby, Texas, a small town, and so we're at this car wash, and next thing you know, he pulled out what you call a crack pipe. Never saw that before in my life. And so he introduced me to crack cocaine for the first time. That was my senior year in high school. And so my senior year in high school, I found myself strung out on crack cocaine, trying to force my way through school.
Wow.
The backstory of that, the day that I graduated high school, I was on crack cocaine.
Wow.
But I found a way to push myself through school.
So you graduated?
I graduated.
Okay.
But I pushed myself through it, and so I can get emotional here, but
That's all right.
it was something, and so at the age of 18, this person ended up getting pregnant. My first child was born at the age of 19. I was on the streets, and my mom.
And what were you doing? Like what did on the streets
So on the
look like for
streets,
you as
the streets looked like
high school?
it was. After I graduated high school, I went straight to the streets. Selling drugs, using drugs, all of those things. Just to try to survive, right? And back and forth to my baby's mom's house, and my daughter was born. I was in the streets. My mom come to the streets, said, "Your daughter is born." I said, "Well, let me finish doing what I'm doing." It took me 3 days to get to the hospital.
Oh, wow.
That was a tough one
Yeah.
for me. And after that, I found myself inside of a prison cell.
Okay. How old were you when you first went to prison?
And so I was 23 years old when I found myself in prison.
Did you go to prison multiple times or just one?
So I went multiple times, went in and out of the system. The first time I went in, it was for drugs again. It was like 8-year sentence.
And was it just, if you don't mind me, just for the specificity, were each of your crimes, were they possession of drugs or related to the sale of drugs?
It was all possession of drugs.
Okay.
So the first time it was possession of drugs, 8-year sentence.
8 years?
8 years possession
Wow.
of drugs. The second time didn't last 6 months on the streets. I thought I was going to be able to go back out and do the right thing. Found myself the first time, just going back to the streets. Less than 6 months I was back in the streets. Probably less than 8 months I was back in prison.
Wow.
For possession again. Received a 10-year sentence. Didn't stay out no time. Man, I tell you, it was one of those moments at the age of 23, I found myself getting locked up again for possession. This time I was facing some massive time. And I was trying to beat the case because at the time, the drugs wasn't in my possession.
Right.
But the officer said he saw me with the drugs. So you know, when your mind is so blinded to the things of this world, you would try to do anything to get out of. You know, and so I found myself in the court system, and the judge said, "Well, we'll give you 20 years." I said, "Well, you know, it wasn't on me, so let's take it to trial." And so less than 13 months, I ended up going to jury trial. Back then, they had what you call drug impact court. So I put 12 in a box, and next thing you know, less than 30 minutes, I was found guilty with a sentence of...
Sorry, what does 12 in a box mean?
12 in a box meaning that you have jury. That's jury,
Okay, I'm
right?
sorry. Okay, excuse me.
So great, that's fine. So the jury trial. So
Right,
it was
okay.
jury. So I ended up going to trial, trying to beat the case, knowing that it was mine. I know it was mine. But again, you know, you're in jail and you hear all this jailhouse talk. You can take them to trial and you can beat them. And so I'm just listening to the jailhouse talk. End up going to trial, and next thing you know, I come up out of there with a 50-year sentence.
50 years?
50 years for possession of cocaine, less than 28 grams.
Wow.
Less than 28 grams. I was smiling on the outside, but crying on the inside, knowing that I may not see daylight again.
And was that because of, was the sentence 50 years because of the multiple nature of your conviction, or was it because Texas, like so many other states in the country and the federal government, see a disparity between crack cocaine and powder cocaine?
I think it was the disparity. I think it was because it was the crack cocaine. Back then in 1986, I caught this drug case in 1991. Texas did what you call crime on drugs like that and things like that. They was driving people through what you call drug impact court back then.
And that was all part of the war on drugs.
It was all part of the war on drugs back then. And so I got caught up in that arena. And so I think it was more like, let's make an example out of him.
And because because of the disparity of sentencing on crack cocaine versus powder cocaine, crack cocaine was more appealing because of its affordability to impoverished communities and communities of color.
Most definitely.
Which has resulted in a real large disproportionality of black men in prison versus our citizenry.
Most definitely. I mean, you have a lot of men doing time, just like I have. I mean, for less than 28 grams, I had a friend of mine that received a life sentence for a crack pipe.
Wow.
I mean, a life sentence. Can you imagine, a life sentence, and so things like that. And so that was in the early 80s, right, in the 90s, because it was crack. There was a heinous crime that they looked, that the court systems was looking at. And so, I received that time, man, and I found myself.
And so what was that? Did you say it was 91 that you went down on that 50 years?
91, I went down on that 50-year sentence. Wow. And so not knowing what was going to happen when I hit the system again, right? And so I ended up going in the system, living just like an animal, like I lived on the streets, And I remember
what did that look like in prison?
And so what that looked like in prison, living like an animal, like in the streets, was everything I did happen. So after the preaching went, they did an altar call. So I went and given my life to the Lord, right? Accept Jesus Christ. Okay, nothing happened. I said, well, this is all about. And then a band of brothers in prison got around me and said, man, brother, you need to be discipled. Now that you accept Christ, you need some discipleship in your life. And so they say Saturday morning at 7 o'clock, we have a discipleship class that are peer-led, led by us, the men that is in prison. It wasn't volunteers. It was men that was in prison.
So this is the church within the prison.
Church within the prison.
Followers of Jesus in the prison.
Yes.
Strong men.
Strong men.
Yeah. Strong followers of Jesus, not jailhouse religion types, but are really walking with the Lord.
Yes.
Said, we need to disciple you.
Yeah, and so I end up going to the discipleship class with the men. And so I'm there in the class. And so these guys, band of brothers, I would say about 12 to 15 guys, they was in this circle. And I joined the circle with them. They started singing, "What a Mighty God We Serve." Yeah. Angels bow before him. What a mighty God we serve.
Yeah.
And so I found myself singing.
Yeah.
And after I started singing with those men, I couldn't stop.
Yeah.
Something began to happen.
Yeah.
You know, like Paul said, a Damascus Road experience.
Right.
Yeah. It was one of those experiences
Yeah.
that I had. And so they still singing. So I found myself singing with the men. And so we sitting down, they sitting down, they ready to teach. So while they was teaching, I'm still like rocking back and forth. I just couldn't stop. It was almost like something was lifted
Yeah. Yeah, it was.
off my shoulders.
Yeah.
And so that day, I went back to the cell block and told the guys, man, I'm finished. I'm living for the Lord.
Yeah. And you're giving up all the drug dealing,
1996.
not all the
Get
fights.
all the fighting in prison, all the pushing of drugs in prison. And guys said, man, you can't quit. I said, I got to, man.
Yeah.
Something has happened.
Yeah.
1996. So time began to pass. The guys began to watch me.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to see what you're doing. What are you really serious
this
about
real?
this?
Yeah, yeah.
Is this real? And so 1996, man, that divine encounter with God changed my life
Yeah.
forever.
That's amazing.
And so in 1997, Prison Fellowship had the academy had just started in Richmond. And so I found myself in the year 2000 coming up for parole.
Mm-hmm.
And so the parole board came and visited and say, if you really want to change your life, there's a program that we're going to send you to.
Yeah.
And actually, that's when I was selected to go to the Prison Fellowship Academy
That's awesome.
in the year of 2000.
Right.
And man, I got off that bus, and it was night and day.
Really?
Night and day, night and day. Coming from a prison where, you know, you fight, you do all of these things. Half of the time you sleep with your clothes on, not knowing what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. To coming into a place where Prison Fellowship Academy, where men greet you right off the bus, says, welcome to the Caravans unit.
Wow.
Glad you're part of the Prison Fellowship Academy. And you're saying, what is this all about? You know, that was amazing. So I was entrenched into a place where I feel like that's what the place God sent me to really hone in on my transformation. Yeah.
Did any part of that curriculum stand out to you in your experience that really had a big impact on you?
And so what really stood out with me was I would call heart of the problem. Mm-hmm. Heart of the problem, because what lies at the heart of the man is the problem.
Yeah.
And it was that curriculum that really spoke volumes, because if I couldn't get my heart right,
Yeah.
I never would be able to function in society.
Yeah.
And so that curriculum was very unique, but there was multiple things that took place, you know, such as, you know, you see a volunteer come in, and volunteers would come in and they give of themselves, and you say, man, these guys, something have to be, you know,
Yeah.
within them for
And
them.
the academy is completely dependent upon the church
Yes,
to get
most
its work
definitely.
done.
Yes.
Right? I mean, you know, an academy like that one, which, you know, is not only the oldest academy that Prison Fellowship has, but also the largest, is, you know, back when you were there, how many church volunteers would you say? Because this is a thing that's very, very much of interest to Watermark. How many volunteers would you say in any given week when you were in the academy were coming in from churches on the outside?
So we had approximately about almost 400 volunteers that came into
400?
400 volunteers that came into their unit to deal with, you know, and you think about 400 men, 400 women, not 400 men or 400 coming from different churches, and you're like,
Now, Watermark, that's just the first 5 rows of the
That's the first-
auditorium at one service.
that's
But
the one service. Wow.
That's all right.
Well, we have to see what we can do. but man, 400 volunteers, and you just see these volunteers coming in and giving up their time and
Yeah.
leaving their families. And for men in prison that don't ever get a visit from family,
Yeah.
they look at that as a visit
Yeah.
from the outside.
Right.
Because I've been walking with a guy and wife for so long, I need to see somebody else and talk to somebody else different. And so men will look at that as more as a visit. This is my family.
Yeah.
And
what's the role that the volunteers would play? Would they do teaching? Would they do mentoring? Would they do kind of all of the above?
all the volunteers play different roles.
Okay.
They teach, mentor. I had a mentor before I walked out of the gate, right? And so, very unique mentor. I mean, man of God. God placed me with this guy, and right now today, after 20-something years, we still best friends.
Wow.
And he's my mentor.
Right.
And man, and this guy walked with me. He talked with me about different things, I didn't know anything about managing a checkbook. Been in prison all my life. He trained me and taught me about what a checkbook looked like, how to, write a check and things like that.
And just out of curiosity, what's his background? Was he
And so
like
he
a kind of blue collar guy?
He
or,
was
or
business guy.
Business guy. Okay.
Business owner, own his own business and
Own his
things
own
like
business.
that. And
Wow.
so he walked in, and I'm thinking like, what this guy got to tell me?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, he's a business guy. Do he know any Bible?
Right.
But he had so much to teach me and to train me while I was in the academy. And it was very unique to the point to where that this guy was my best man in my wedding.
Wow.
That's how much he meant.
That's amazing.
And so that's how much volunteers mean to men and women that are doing time.
Yeah.
They mean so much because that's the only hope.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That's the only example that they have that is living before them.
Right.
When a volunteer go into a unit, they are an example of the Lord.
Yeah.
And as they begin to walk and carry their life, as God desired and how God lead them, they're that example. And that's all we have to see the model out there.
Yeah.
And things like that. And you see volunteers coming in smiling, bringing in hope. It's like, man, that's what I want right there.
Right.
I want that, and I said that.
Yeah. So you get out of prison, and you already had your high school diploma.
Yes.
So I understand you went and got a college degree.
Yes. And so
What did you get a degree in?
So I enrolled in College of Biblical Studies in Biblical Counseling. So I received my degree in my bachelor's degree in Biblical Counseling. And something that I just want to say that I was the only one in my family ever went to college.
Wow. Yeah.
But, and to me, that's a big step.
That's a big step.
And as a result of me going, and getting my degree from the College of Biblical Studies, and it was very unique, and God blessed me, just with a beautiful family, man.
Right. You can we talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, that's fine.
So you married, and you've had 2 children.
Yes.
From the wife that you married after you got out of prison. Did you remain in community with the daughter that was born before you went to prison?
So it was a hit and miss.
Okay.
In other words, my family would always introduce her.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying, to me and things like that. So it was like once a year I'll see her and things like that. But when I enrolled into the academy, we were so close, right? And that she was in my backyard, I was able to see her on a regular basis. And that's another piece that the academy brings to the table. They don't only restore men and women in prison, but they try to restore men and women back to their families as well.
Right.
And so, yeah.
Another great role for the church to play.
Most definitely.
In serving the families who have incarcerated spouses, parents in prison.
Yes.
That's another important mission field.
Most definitely. It's very important.
So you and your oldest daughter, are you reconciled?
So we reconcile, man. To me, the best relationship, that I believe that I can ever have. I never thought that it would take place. It's not because of what she did. It's because of what I'd done. And some of the things that were said about me was truth, right? And so there were seeds that were sown that your dad would never be able to mount anything and this and that. And so I had to prove myself. I just couldn't walk back out and just step into her life. And so there was a process. She was a teenager, and so it's like, what you gonna do for me now?
Right.
And one thing that she mentioned probably about almost a year ago to me, she said, Dad, I realized something. I said, what? She said, I was a sacrifice for you to do what you're doing right now today. Because if you hadn't went to prison, and my grandpa them didn't raise me the way they raised me, you wouldn't be doing prison ministry the way you're doing prison ministry right now.
Yeah.
So I was a sacrifice based on your career.
That's very powerful.
And it hit me.
Yeah.
It's like, for her to think that way,
Right.
it's like, wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I can see it.
Yeah.
I can see how I can understand her perspective. So let's talk about that. So you had a strong pull to give back. So after
Yes.
you got your degree, what'd you do?
So after I received my degree, prison fellowship, I applied for prison fellowship, and it didn't happen right away. At the time, prison fellowship had a freeze on hiring, and so it's almost like by 3 or 4 times, it was like, all right, not this time. Okay, I'll just wait. And so during the process, I was a volunteer inside of the unit.
Right.
So I volunteered in the unit probably 2 years after I was released. And so in 2004, I was a volunteer.
Right.
So going back and forth in and out of the unit. And then 2011, Prison Fellowship, decided to take a chance with me. And so been with Prison Fellowship, working in the same unit
That you graduated from.
that I graduated from.
That's amazing.
Now, the backdrop of the story is this, though. Not only working in the same unit, but working in the same office, or in the same office that I helped create.
Wow.
And so back then, we didn't have a chapel.
Right.
It was the gym where we did everything. And so in the year 2001, they built a chapel. And so I was a part of the labor that has helped build it. And so in other words, painting the walls in the chapel,
Right. You
I
put
helped
up
paint
there.
the wall.
Right.
Laying the tile on the floor, I helped lay the tile on the floor, not knowing that I was building my career.
Right.
Right.
So in 2016, something really phenomenal
Oh,
happened.
my.
What happened?
So in 2016, from being a mentor in 2004, 2011, coming back on staff as a counselor, then 2016, became the director of the same place,
Of that prison fellowship academy.
of that prison fellowship academy
Yeah.
I was at. And we always say, with God, all things are possible.
Yeah.
And I would always tell men, there's no excuse, none whatsoever. If I can come out of prison and do what I do, you can do the same thing.
Right.
Yeah, and so it's one of those. So being a director of that program,
Like you said, with God, all things.
with God, all things are possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's how I lived my life. And so as a result of that, the reward of me going back in and day out of that prison, it's something. I mean, I tell you, I got to tell you this, though. It really got me when I first went back in. Really did.
Yeah.
When I first
You
walked
mean back in 2004?
back in 2004, when I first walked back, just kind of rewind, when I first walked back in the gate, my emotions was very high.
Oh, yeah.
And coming out, because they take your driver license, right? And so the guy, Brooks, real loud. And it just rattled, because that's how they call you when you're in prison, by your last name.
Right.
And it was almost like a culture shock all over again. It was almost like I was reliving my prison experience. Yeah. And I'm saying to myself, do I want to go back through this? But I did. So, yeah, it was one of those moments for me. But, I mean, I wouldn't do anything different.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, your journey's quite amazing. And, I've heard men and women say before that going to prison was the best thing that ever happened to them. Would you say the same thing, or do you see it from a different perspective?
I would say going to prison saved my life.
Okay.
That's what I would say. Because if it had not been for prison, I probably would have been dead in the streets.
Yep.
But because of prison, my life, I believe my life was saved. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. Most definitely.
Chuck Colson referred to men and women who would come out of prison and become leaders in the church, his living monuments.
Yes.
Darryl, you were one of Chuck's living monuments.
Wow.
You're a testament to the work that he started, that made his life's work. You applied it and you made it work. You turned around, you came back in and mentored and counseled men, rose the ranks within that academy, and now you lead the oldest and largest prison fellowship academy in the nation.
Wow.
It's amazing.
God is good, man.
God is good.
Yeah.
God is really good.
So I'm so grateful. I
Yeah.
mean, to be able to do what I do,
Yep.
you know, and to give back to those men. Just walking in speak volumes
Yeah.
to the guys. You know, it really does. And so I don't take that lightly. I know that it's God,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying, that have done it, you know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? But you know, it used Prison Fellowship to be able to do it. So I believe that Prison Fellowship was that channel that God used to really impact my life. Not only mine, but right now today it's impacting my family life
Yeah.
and those that are abroad.
Yeah.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah.
And now you're a husband.
Husband.
You
Mhm.
have 2 children with your wife.
Yes.
Your oldest daughter from before you went to prison, and she has 2 grandbabies.
And 2 grandbabies.
Wow.
Man,
Amazing.
I know I don't
So
look
you're a
that
blessed
old.
man.
I'm a blessed man. I don't look that old, but yeah. I'm a blessed man. Yeah, I'm really blessed. And it's because of God. I mean, when we put God first, no matter where we have been in life,
Yeah.
God can take us and use us for his glory.
Absolutely.
And I believe that that's what has happened. But that was a responsibility on my part. I had to yield to it,
Yeah.
you know, and so, yeah,
Yeah. Darryl, thank you so much for sharing your story. I appreciate it.
no problem.
It's a hard place to go sometimes,
Yeah.
and I appreciate
Yeah.
your vulnerability, your transparency, but it's going to inspire so many people who will understand that whether somebody's in prison or not, they're people. And
Yes.
Jesus calls us in Matthew
Yes.
25 to
Yes.
visit the prison. Paul calls us in Hebrews 13:3 to remember those in prison as if you are serving with them.
Mm-hmm.
God wants us to have an empathetic relationship with people in prison. They're part of our community.
Yes, yes.
Awesome.
Well, I would just say thank you for having me
Of course.
on this setting. You know, I wouldn't change a thing because it's all God's glory.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah.
Amen to that. Thank you so much.
Thanks.